Well, hello and welcome to our weekly gathering at Vita Spiritual Learning Center. I'm delighted to be with you here today. So let me jump right into it. Here's our themes for 2022 brought to us by Centers for Spiritual Living. And the 2022 theme is Living Everyday Wonder. The theme for February is The Inner Life. And our topic for this week is called A Pause for the Cause. And our contributor is Dr. Gladys Gonzalez Vigil, founding director at Centro Alquimia in Lima, Peru. How about that? And just for those who want to read along with our themes, the book for the year for 2022 is called Ordinary Wonder by Charlotte Joko Beck. And our book for the month of February is Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. So I'm just wondering how anyone is doing with living this everyday wonder in 2022. Since we've introduced that theme, have you noticed how much more wondrous, wonderful, how much in awe you might be of ordinary, everyday things? And it's indeed wondrous that you and I are just gathered here today through this technology. And this technology is really allowing us to circulate the light and love of living spirit. Pretty wonderful, I feel. So in February, we're looking at the inner life. And the inner life implies there's an outer life, and that maybe life is dual in some way. And an inner life apart from an outer life would be two different lives, right? But in the science of mind and spirit, Ernest Holmes says there is one life, and that life is God, and that life is my life now. So whether it's an inner life or an outer life, they're both aspects or facets of one universal life. And it doesn't mean that that one life is my life apart from yours. It means all of our lives are part of one life, that universal life. And that inner and outer life are all activities of living spirit. So at times, the inner life is getting your attention, and at times, the outer world is getting your attention. So whether you're trying to heal some psychic wound or to amplify something already rich and full, you and I are here today to live that full life, to feel better, to have a better life. And more specifically, you recognize that this human phase is really the best opportunity to grow your consciousness, for your soul to heal, to grow, to learn and love. And this human phase is about balancing a rich inner life with the wonders of the world. So Dr. Gladys Gonzalez Vigil says, "For this you have dressed in this suit of flesh. That it is the vehicle you need to function on this plane of existence, and it's what you need to fulfill your purpose of transformation, to live the life of God. And you can live from a position of power, knowing that you extend and emanate from a greater consciousness, and that there is a divine intelligence behind your existence." Pretty phenomenal, I feel. Thank you, Dr. Gladys. So a pause for the cause begins with the pause. And a pause can be that moment that you took a few minutes ago just to notice something wondrous. A pause can be a backward glance. It means it can be that opportunity to notice how your life, good or bad, how it got to be the way it is. And it's that pause where you notice, in the case of the science of mind teaching, the thinking, the choices that have created and continue to create the totality of your life, meaning those perceptions that you associate with this earthly phase of your soul's journey. And cause in this case refers to cause and effect. And cause and effect is a metaphysical principle. It's a kind of law or algorithm. It's the law that says that the egg begets the bird, that the seed begets the plant, and the thought begets reality. So as a metaphysician, one of the basic tools in growing your consciousness is using the law of cause and effect. And the law of cause and effect has a few dimensions to it. The first dimension is the one that's most easily understood. It is a way of consciously creating. In our case, it is consciously co-creating with living spirit, with that universal presence. So that's one dimension of cause and effect. There's another dimension of cause and effect, which is retracing your steps. You look at the effects, at what is manifested or outpictured in your life, and trace them back to what we hope to be true causes. And this includes a process of bringing beliefs to conscious awareness. And you bring those beliefs to conscious awareness to either reject the belief and release it, to update it or modify that belief, or to strengthen or reinforce a belief that tends to really be working well for you. And a third dimension is to analyze your inner and outer life so you can discern, you can figure out the difference between what we would call coincidence or correlation or superstition from an actual cause and effect relationship. So you've heard that phrase, correlation, it does not mean causation. Just because two events either occurred next to each other or were part of a sequence, a step one and then a step two, doesn't necessarily mean step one caused step two. It's just how they happen to have occurred. So in our case, we're being very deliberate about noticing our thoughts, our thinking, and that thinking is a cause. It is something that sets spirit into motion. And that spirit set into motion then outpictures and manifests, demonstrates something in the world of effect, in the world of your sensory perceptions. So as you become accomplished in the use of metaphysical law, you begin to realize some maxims, some truisms about the use of those metaphysical laws. The first one comes from Thomas Troward. Thomas Troward said, "Principle is not bound by precedent." And the first thing that this principle that is not bound by precedent, you'll notice, is that as you work the law again and again, you get different, usually better results, right? Mostly because your next application is with a consciousness that has healed and grown from the previous application. So follow me on this. As you work the law, as you practice this law of cause and effect, you catch an idea, you set an intention in your life, and then that intention comes to fruition. It manifests, it demonstrates in your life. You say, "This is great, let me do it again." And you do it again, yet you get something different. You get something maybe better, or maybe something that leads you in a different direction. So even within yourself, principle is not bound by precedent. Whatever you got the first time around is probably going to be a little bit different the second time around. And the next thing you know, that what you manifest and demonstrate in your life by working the law of cause and effect isn't tied to anyone else's, right? You're healing and growing primarily from your own consciousness, and therefore those manifestations and demonstrations are unique to you, right? You're not duplicating exactly someone else's manifestations and demonstrations. Two people can be applying the same principle of cause and effect. They can even have the same exact intention. But the demonstrations of those intentions are going to be unique to that person. Yours is going to be unique and different from someone else's. And as Reverend Sunshine says, you are the unique and unrepeatable way that spirit expresses an experience in this plane of existence. So how does pause come into this idea of cause and effect? Well, part of the 3 areas of pausing that I talked about before is to take a pause to clarify your intention, right? And that also leads to something that is hopefully something you're doing every day, which is spiritual practice, right? So spiritual practice is a form of a pause. Before you set any of these other metaphysical laws in motion, you are taking time to meditate and to treat or affirm or pray. You're taking time to journal or do some form of spiritual study. You're taking time to vision. You're taking that moment of receptivity and just getting the God idea for your life. You're also perhaps seeing your spiritual counselor. You're joining in the beloved community. You are circulating your good in that community, giving as a spiritual practice. So you're doing all of these things, and all of that is sort of an intention to elevate yourself out of sort of earth plane attention, the outer world attention, and you're taking that pause to look inward, to cultivate your inner life. I love the biblical quote from Romans 12, chapter 12, verse 2. It says, "Do not imitate the way of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may discern what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." So that's pretty fantastic. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? So let me just talk about that a little bit. So do not imitate the ways of this world. Well, world is the outer life. It's an effect of some other cause. So the outer world, when used to its best and highest purpose, is going to reflect or mirror back to you what you're creating in your thinking. As bad or good as it might be, the world of effect is not for some static purpose. It's not to be stuck in a life as is. But in order for your thinking to evolve, for your consciousness to grow, you're going to have to take in that sensory information from the world of effect. It says, transform by the renewing of your mind. Now, we have a bumper sticker in Science of Mind and in Centers for Spiritual Living that goes something like, change your thinking, change your life. And that you can fit on a bumper sticker, and it's pretty handy. Change your thinking, change your life, right? And you might have noticed on the back of cars, there are a variety of things from stickers all the way up to entire wraps. And so I'm going to expand on this, and we're probably going to end up with a banner, right? But mind, so the renewing of your mind, in the science of mind and spirit, mind is not just your conscious thoughts, right? But it's all aspects of your sensory being and all of your creative faculties. It is the subconscious. It is your beliefs. It is those other ingrained habits or patterns. It is your intuition. It is your feelings. These are all part of mind, and that mind that is local to you is part of the one mind of which you are an extension and an emanation. Isn't that fantastic? So the bumper sticker gets a little bit bigger, and it says, pause first to become aware of your thinking. And once you become aware of your thinking, then your thinking is directed. It is consciously being able to be changed, right? And then as your thinking is changed, the challenge becomes, how do you keep it changed? How do you keep from reverting back to old habits, old patterns, old beliefs? And finally, the quote from Romans says, discern what is that good will of God. Well, this obviously brings up a whole nother topic about my will versus God's will. I mean, you appear to have some will that operates according to your choice, and that will can appear to diverge from or align with a greater will, or God's will, as we might call it. But whether you're aware of it, your will is all part of God's will. Right? Let me just say that again. Whether you're aware of it, your will is all part of God's will, because this is all one life and it's all one mind. And that as your consciousness heals and grows, what you once perceived to be your will, separate from anyone else's or anything else's or God's will, is actually you becoming more aware of a tendency of spirit within. So as you're sort of more suggestible to something greater than a limited life that you might have imagined for yourself, that will of God is actually willing out, right? And so you're becoming more aware of that tendency of spirit within and surrounding you to express and experience more of the good that it is, more of the God self, the good self. And that intention in general is for you to be a happier and more peaceful and more compassionate and more loving presence, right? And so from a science of mind perspective, renewing your mind helps you discern what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. It helps you really begin to consciously align with that will that wants love and joy and peace. So as you discern, your life changes. Your moment-to-moment living aligns more closely to the truth of your being, which is pure spirit. So now we've got a whole banner to cover the back of our car, which is pause, witness your thinking. And as you witness your thinking, you are able to change your thinking. And as your thinking changes for the better, through spiritual practice, you keep it changed, and as you keep it changed, you change your life. At times, the use of the creative process, this idea of cause and effect, this law of cause and effect, it appears to bring about material change. So I want to be really clear about this. You're not changing the world, you're not changing God, but you are changing your expression and experience of God. You're getting better at living spirit. So that's what's changing. You're coming more in alignment with, more an expression of, more an experience of living spirit, who you are at your innermost self. So becoming skilled in metaphysics begins, as I mentioned, with the law of cause and effect. And mind is that those thoughts, those feelings, those intuition, those ideas, that inner life, all of that is creating your life, and it's creating in proportion to what I refer to as the frequency and the phase of the amplitude of that thinking. So thinking out pictures, it manifests, it demonstrates. Sometimes it's something in the material world, but it certainly demonstrates and manifests as an inward sensation that shifts. You feel better, and you feel better more frequently. Now, like most people, my early use of cause and effect were experiments in making definite the infinite, right? To manifest that parking space, or manifest that relationship, or manifest that job, right? These are all sort of comparatively small potatoes for living spirit. But as I was taught, when I ask the universe for something, I add the qualifier, this or something better, right? Because I know I'm starting out with some relatively small ask, some might be admittedly limited thinking, right? But my positive experience with cause and effect begins to build a foundation upon which more and more spiritual growth is not only possible, but it is happening. And this idea of cause and effect is really vital to identifying and redirecting thoughts of being less than or at the effect of, or what I would call stinking thinking, right? So that I'm able to affirm the constructive and positive opposite. So what do I mean about frequency, phase, and amplitude of thought? Well, as I've said many times, fleeting thoughts have fleeting demonstrations, right? As those thoughts come and go, they have little overall net growth in consciousness, let alone have very temporary manifestations or demonstrations. But thinking that is consistent and well-timed and deep, those have definite manifestations, and that certainly grows your consciousness. And the manifestations themselves become the basis for a more consistent and a more well-timed and a deeper thinking. And all of that contributes to more and more healing and more growing in consciousness. And you take that pause to appreciate what are the causes, what is the first cause that is synonymous with God, what is the infinite creative force for good that you are using. And cause is sort of an ongoing and constant and ever creating goodness. You can just think about first cause that way. Effects are temporary and changeable. And as I've learned, it's important to pause and recognize and appreciate both causes and effects, so not to get stuck in the realm of effect, not to overly live a life in the outer world, which is giving not enough attention to an inner life, right? So it's easy to get distracted with the effects, with the stuff, with the achievements, with the accomplishments. And no matter how hard you try, those things are fleeting. They're temporary because they are effects. They are changeable. But the cause, the infinite creative, it is absolute. And that infinite creating is awaiting my next use of it to advance my consciousness, to be a more loving, more peaceful, more compassionate circulator of living spirit. Well, thank you so much. You have a wonderful week.